Welcome to another deep dive. You know, when it comes to mental health these days, it seems like everyone's suddenly like an armchair therapist.
Right.
But
Yeah.
you've gone deeper. You've brought us this like whole stack of sources about different models of therapy, some widely accepted, some that are really challenging the norm. You've even got some sources that are exploring like totally different approaches altogether.
Yeah.
So are you ready to like deep dive into this fascinating and often like debated world of mental health?
Let's do it. I think it's so fascinating how the medical model, it remains so influential, despite decades of critique. It's often our first introduction to mental health, right?
Yeah.
Symptoms, diagnoses, treatments.
Yeah.
But as you've pointed out with these sources, the staying power of an idea, it doesn't always equal validity. Sometimes these ideas stick around because they serve a different purpose. And uncovering those hidden reasons, that's what makes this deep dive so interesting.
Okay, let's unpack that. Now, I think it's safe to assume that you've bumped into the medical model before.
Oh, yeah.
It's everywhere.
Absolutely.
It treats like symptoms, like puzzle pieces.
Right.
Clues to some underlying biological issue. Find the problem, fix the problem, preferably with medication.
Exactly. Like, take that McGovern Medical School article you shared, the one about depression as like a neurochemical disorder, primarily caused by serotonin dysfunction.
Right.
That perspective, it heavily reinforces a medical approach, right? Pointing towards medication as the solution to correct the perceived chemical imbalance.
It does seem to make sense on the surface, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Like, find the issue, provide the pill, problem solved.
On the surface, perhaps. But delve into the history of mental health and things get much more complex. You see, psychotherapy initially emerged as a social talk-based approach.
Okay.
The shift towards the medical model as like the dominant force, it's a story in itself, one that's, intertwined with society's evolving views on mental health and the desire for legitimacy within the medical field. So it's like psychotherapy wanted a seat at the grown-up table of medicine and maybe borrowed some credibility to get there.
Precisely. It's all about context.
Yeah.
Remember your source that mentioned Bedlam Hospital?
Yeah.
It wasn't exactly a beacon of progressive care.
Right.
For centuries, mental health treatments, they were often brutal, often steeped in religious and moral judgments, exorcisms, confinement. It was a dark period.
Yeah. Compared to that, the medical model almost seems, I don't know, civilized.
On the surface, yes. But remember, even the early medical model had its share of treatment we'd now consider barbaric. Think hydrotherapy, rotational therapy, even lobotomies.
Right.
What constitutes ethical and effective treatment that's radically evolved?
Yeah.
Like, for example, in the 19th century, Benjamin Rush, considered the father of American psychiatry, he believed mental illness stemmed from inflammation of the brain and blood vessels.
Okay.
The solution: spinning patients at high speeds in a chair to redistribute blood flow.
Wow. Talk about a wild ride.
Right. It really makes you wonder about progress, doesn't it? Like, what we consider cutting edge today might be tomorrow's horror story.
Yeah.
It makes the point that maybe questioning progress in any field is important, especially when it comes to something as complex as the human mind. But that's also where those cracks in the foundation of the medical model start to show, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
As much as the medical model tries to present this unified front, there are experts, many cited in these sources you've shared, who are raising some serious red flags. One quote that really struck me was, and I'm quoting here, "In the discourse of the traditional medical model, it is common to reduce patients to a diagnostic label, grouping them according to their symptoms and treating them as just another case within a predefined category. This perspective, focused on the disease or disorder, strips individuals of their context, their histories, and their identity, focusing only on what is wrong with them." It's a powerful statement.
Yeah.
And it highlights a major concern about the medical model, the potential for dehumanization.
It does, and that quote, it cuts to the heart of the critique. While the medical model, it undeniably has its place and has been effective for many.
Right.
Critics argue it doesn't capture the full picture. It often overlooks the profound impact of social factors, personal experiences, and individual differences on mental health. It's like trying to understand a symphony by analyzing a single note.
So it's It's less like solving for X and more like trying to understand a Jackson Pollock painting.
Yeah.
Beautiful, complex, and a little messy.
Exactly. And here's where it gets really interesting, especially if you love those aha moments.
Okay.
You see, the medical model, it loves its classifications, organizing mental health conditions into these neat little boxes,
Right.
often based on observable symptoms rather than a deeper understanding of their root causes.
Okay.
And the best example of this is the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, the DSM. Your source material mentions how it's been revised, like a lot. We're talking diagnoses added, removed, redefined. Almost as if our understanding is less fixed and more, well, fluid.
It makes you wonder, what if those lines we draw between different mental health conditions are more like guidelines than hard boundaries?
That's a crucial question, and it's why exploring alternatives to the medical model is so important. Your research includes some fascinating perspectives, like the constructivist approach.
Right. The approach suggesting we play an active role in building our understanding of the world. It feels like a completely different way of looking at therapy.
It is a significant shift. In this model, therapy isn't about like fixing a broken brain,
Right.
but about understanding how an individual, how they make sense of their experiences, their relationships, and the world around them. It's about recognizing that we all construct our own realities, based on our unique experiences and interpretations.
So instead of like slapping a label like generalized anxiety disorder on someone, a constructivist therapist might explore the narratives, beliefs, and thought patterns that contribute to their anxious feelings.
Exactly. It's a move from labeling to understanding. Like, for example, imagine someone who constantly worries about their job security.
Okay.
A constructivist therapist might explore their past experiences. Perhaps they grew up with parents who struggled financially, right? Leading to this deep-seated belief that jobs are always precarious, even if their current situation is stable.
Wow. So it's about uncovering those hidden scripts that are like driving our behavior, the ones we might not even be aware of. That's fascinating. And this approach, this shift, it feels empowering for the individual, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Therapy becomes less about fitting into a diagnostic box and more about creating a new, more empowering story.
Right.
One that helps them navigate the world in a way that feels safer and more manageable. Take the source material with that figure, exemplification of an evidence-based trans-theoretical model, the CARE model of mental health treatments. It highlights how alternative models, they prioritize the therapeutic alliance, empathy, and fostering hope.
It's a world away from that cold clinical image we often associate with the medical model. I have to admit, when I hear medical model, I picture sterile white walls and clipboards.
Yeah, it's an understandable association, but it highlights a crucial point, right?
Mm-hmm.
Healing, it isn't solely about pills or procedures.
Yeah.
It often flourishes through connection, understanding, and a genuine collaboration between, the therapist and the individual.
Speaking of collaboration, one source brought up a really important point about patient choice and agency.
Mm-hmm.
It suggests medical professionals, they don't always present all treatment options,
Right.
potentially limiting an individual's ability to make, fully informed decisions about their own mental health care.
Mm-hmm.
We've talked a lot about alternative models, but like at the end of the day, shouldn't the individual have a say in how they approach their own well-being?
Absolutely. One of the most significant criticisms of the medical model is that it can unintentionally disempower individuals. By placing the power in the hands of medical professionals, it can create a dynamic where individuals, they feel like passive recipients of treatment rather than active participants in their own healing journey.
And that's a recipe for disengagement,
Yeah.
right? If you don't feel ownership over your treatment, why would you fully commit to it?
Exactly. Empowering individuals to make informed choices about their mental health care, it's crucial, not just ethically, but also for the success of the treatment itself. One of your sources, it argues that true healing requires agency.
Yeah.
The ability to choose a path that aligns with your values, your beliefs, and your personal goals. It's about recognizing that there's no one-size-fits-all solution when it comes to mental health.
It's about finding what works for you, what resonates with your own, unique experiences and aspirations. It's a far cry from the doctor knows best mentality that's often associated with the medical model.
And it's a reminder that healing isn't a passive process.
Right.
It's an active journey of self-discovery, exploration, and growth.
When we talk about mental health challenges, there's this like automatic assumption that they're inherently bad,
Yeah.
something to be feared and avoided. But one of the sources you shared, it challenged that whole notion. It argued that anxiety, for example, isn't inherently a bad thing.
Right.
It's our like internal alarm system designed to keep us safe.
It's a perspective that often gets lost in our eagerness to eliminate discomfort. That source, it even questions how we use the word symptoms, when talking about anxiety.
Oh, okay.
It suggests these physical and emotional responses, the racing heart, the racing thoughts, they're actually adaptive. It's our body's way of trying to protect us in the face of perceived danger.
So instead of labeling those sensations as like symptoms of a disorder,
Right.
we can choose to see them as our body's natural way of trying to protect us.
Yeah.
A sign that our internal alarm system is doing its job.
Exactly. Imagine like you're walking down a dark street at night and you hear footsteps behind you.
Okay.
Your heart starts racing, your palms get sweaty, your mind, it goes into overdrive, scanning for potential threats.
Right.
These physical sensations, while uncomfortable,
Yeah.
they're actually your body's way of preparing you to respond to potential danger.
It's the fight or flight response kicking in, right? Our body's ancient survival mechanism, hardwired into our DNA.
Mm-hmm.
But the source also points out that our modern world can kind of mess with this alarm system, right?
It's true. Our ancient stress response system, finely tuned for survival in a world of predators and immediate threats.
Right.
It isn't quite equipped for the constant barrage of stressors we face in modern life. Think work deadlines, social media, the 24/7 news cycle.
Right.
They trigger the same physiological responses those very real threats that our ancestors faced.
So that deadline might feel like a life or death situation, even though, like, rationally, we know it isn't. Our bodies haven't quite caught up to the fact that a stressful email isn't a saber-toothed tiger. No wonder so many people struggle with anxiety these days.
It's important to remember that anxiety is a natural human emotion, and it can actually be helpful in some situations.
Right.
It's what motivates us to study for that exam, prepare for that presentation, or meet that deadline. It's only when anxiety becomes excessive, persistent, and starts to, interfere with our daily lives that it becomes a problem.
Which is where therapy comes in.
Exactly.
Okay, I remember the source mentioned, like, therapy can equip individuals with the tools to soothe their nervous systems, manage those stress responses, and develop healthier, more adaptive coping mechanisms.
Absolutely. It emphasizes the importance of psychoeducation, helping individuals understand how anxiety works, how to differentiate between helpful and unhelpful anxiety, and how to develop a more balanced and empowered relationship with it.
Instead of being afraid of anxiety, it's about learning to work with it, understanding its message, and harnessing its energy in a way that supports our well-being rather than undermines it.
Mm-hmm.
But there was concern raised in another source that the medical model, it might contribute to people over-identifying with their anxiety,
Right.
viewing it as an inherent flaw rather than a normal human experience.
That's a critical point, and it speaks to the power of labels. When we label something as a disorder, it can create this sense of powerlessness and hopelessness.
Right.
It reinforces the belief that we're broken and need to be fixed, rather than recognizing our innate capacity for healing and growth.
It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. We worry about our anxiety, which makes us more anxious, which confirms our belief that we have a problem. It's like we're trapping ourselves in a vicious cycle.
And breaking free from that cycle requires a shift in perspective. Instead of viewing anxiety as the enemy,
Right.
we can learn to see it as a messenger, a signal that something needs our attention.
I love that. Instead of just trying to, like, shut down the alarm system, it's about investigating what triggered it in the first place.
Yeah.
Speaking of different perspectives, our source material highlighted how psychotherapy itself is a product of its environment, shaped by the culture and values of the society in which it exists. It's like how fashion trends change, right?
Yeah.
Like what's considered a fashion faux pas in one culture might be like all the rage in another.
Right.
Makes you wonder if the same could be said for certain therapeutic techniques.
Absolutely. What's considered effective in one culture might not translate well to another. For instance, some cultures, they value direct communication,
Right.
while others, they prioritize indirectness. A therapist trained in a culture that emphasizes like direct confrontation
Okay.
might inadvertently create a sense of shame or disrespect when working with a client from a culture that values a more gentle approach.
It highlights the importance of cultural humility, doesn't it? Like, therapists need to be mindful of their own biases and assumptions and approach each individual with a willingness to learn and adapt their methods. One of the studies you shared mentioned how some therapists, they feel like their perspectives are ignored when they challenge the medical model.
Yes, that study found that many therapists, especially those who, prioritize social and environmental factors in understanding mental health, they feel unheard in settings that are dominated by the medical model.
Right.
It's as if they speak a different language.
Okay.
They see the impact of poverty, discrimination, and systemic oppression on an individual's mental health.
Yeah.
But those factors are often overlooked in a system that's focused on, diagnoses and medication.
It sounds like a tough spot for these therapists wanting to advocate for their clients' needs while navigating a system that's resistant to change.
It is.
It's like trying to fit a square peg in a round hole.
Mm-hmm.
This study mentioned 3 ways therapists navigate this tension, right?
Right. Some they engage in open dissent, actively challenging the medical model and advocating for alternative perspectives.
Okay.
Others they try to compromise, finding ways to kind of integrate their approaches within the existing medical framework.
Right.
Maybe highlighting the social determinants of mental health during a diagnosis.
Right.
And then there are those who end up unintentionally or not reinforcing the medical model by adopting its language and practices.
So it's this constant push and pull, this balancing act between staying true to your values and working within the constraints of the system.
Exactly. It highlights the importance of supporting therapists who are pushing for change, creating spaces where they can voice their concerns, share their perspectives, and advocate for a more holistic and nuanced approach to mental health care.
Because ultimately, it's about what serves the individual best. And that might look different for everyone. Speaking of serving the individual, one concept that stood out from our sources was this idea of shifting our focus from the absence of illness to the presence of well-being.
Right. And your sources highlighted a great quote from the World Health Organization
Okay.
that defines mental health as, and I'm quoting here, a comprehensive state of mental well-being that enables people to cope with the stresses of life, realize their abilities, learn well and work well, and contribute to their community. It's a definition that moves beyond simply not being unwell.
It's about thriving, not just surviving.
Yes.
It reminds me of that saying, mental health is not just the absence of mental illness, but the presence of well-being.
It's a good analogy, and this shift in perspective, it has significant implications for how we approach mental health care. It suggests that our goal shouldn't just be to eliminate distress,
Right.
but to cultivate well-being, resilience, and personal growth.
Instead of just putting out fires, we're also planting trees under whose shade we may never sit.
Right.
It's a more proactive and empowering approach.
Right.
And one source took this idea a step further,
Yeah.
asserting that mental health is a human right, not something to be solely relegated to medical professionals.
That's a powerful statement, and it challenges the medical model's dominance.
Mm-hmm.
It suggests that creating a society that supports mental well-being, it's everyone's responsibility,
Yeah.
not just the medical community.
It's about fostering a culture that values mental health, not one that just pathologizes and medicalizes it.
Right.
It's about changing the narrative around mental health, challenging stigma, and creating a world where seeking help is seen as a sign of strength, not weakness.
And that requires a shift from focusing on individual deficits to a more holistic, systemic approach. It's about addressing the social determinants of mental health, poverty, discrimination, lack of access to education and healthcare that contribute to suffering and create barriers to well-being.
It's about understanding that mental health is not just about what's going on inside our heads, but also about the world we live in and the systems that shape our lives.
Yeah.
But even within those systems, within a therapeutic setting, like that human connection, that therapeutic alliance, that can be incredibly powerful.
Absolutely. Regardless of the therapeutic model used, studies consistently show that a a strong therapeutic alliance, that bond of trust, empathy, and collaboration between, therapist and client.
Right.
It's one of the strongest predictors of positive outcomes in therapy.
It's about creating a space where individuals, they feel seen, heard, understood, and empowered to take ownership of their own healing journeys.
And that sense of safety and trust,
Yep.
it allows individuals to explore difficult emotions, challenge negative thought patterns, and develop healthier coping mechanisms.
It's like that saying, the wound is the place where the light enters you. It's in those moments of vulnerability and connection that true healing and transformation can occur.
Beautifully put. It reminds us that while the journey of healing, it can be challenging, it's also an opportunity for profound growth, self-discovery, and a deeper connection to ourselves and others.
This deep dive has been such an eye-opening exploration into the multifaceted world of mental health. We've covered a lot of ground, from unpacking the complexities of the medical model to exploring alternative perspectives that challenge the status quo. We've talked about the importance of cultural humility, the power of the therapeutic alliance, and the need for a more holistic and compassionate approach to mental health care. But one question keeps coming back to me. What if, instead of solely focusing on eliminating suffering, we embraced a more expansive view of mental health, one that encompasses not just the absence of distress, but also the presence of well-being, meaning, and purpose?
That's a powerful question. And it challenges us to reimagine mental health, not just as the absence of illness, but as the presence of something more, something richer and more fulfilling.
Exactly. What if mental health challenges, as difficult as they are, could also be opportunities for growth and transformation? What if, instead of fearing our struggles, we could learn to embrace them as catalysts for growth and self-discovery?
That's the heart of this entire conversation, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's about recognizing that even in the darkest of times, there's always potential for healing, for growth, and a deeper connection to ourselves and the world around us.
Yeah. It's been an absolute pleasure unpacking these complex and incredibly relevant topics with you. And to our listener, thank you. Thank you for sharing these thought-provoking sources that sparked such an engaging conversation. As we conclude this deep dive into the world of psychotherapy and its many approaches, remember, your mental well-being is a journey, not a destination. And like any worthwhile journey, it's often filled with both challenges and triumphs, setbacks, and breakthroughs.
Embrace the complexity. Stay curious. And never underestimate your own inherent capacity for healing and growth.
Until next time, keep asking those tough questions and keep diving deep.